I like models and simulations. When I was a kid, I enjoyed seeing dollhouses set up at the county fair, and I was just intrigued as heck by how detailed some of those were. And the kids would put them together, and then they would be in competition, and it was just incredible to see these miniatures. I also loved model trains, and I was transfixed by seeing these railroad layouts that they would set up and put on display, and I wanted one so bad. I remember, I loved having these little, barns and plastic animals, and I would lay out felt pieces and pretend that they were grass, and had brown ones, and I'd pretend that was dirt, and, that was my childhood. I loved little model buildings and little toy cars, and I'd set them up and make a little downtown districts and have the toy cars all lined up. I loved, playing with blocks and building model buildings, and then kinda destroying them and seeing them all sorta come clattering down. That was my childhood. And then I got into gaming, and it was kind of a digital version of that. It was the opportunity to see some sort of a simulated world where it was alive, and I could play a role in how it worked. Maybe to create it, or maybe just to interact with it. And that was the fun of things like Sim City and Sim Tower and Sim Farm and all those sim games and tycoon games that used to be really popular back in the early 2000s. And then in the last couple of years, I've been fairly into MMOs. And I like that idea of you create a character and then you go into a virtual world. And it's pretty cool. But most MMOs are not simulations. Most MMOs are more like a stage play. It's more like going to a theater and you see all the props on the stage and you see maybe cool things, but you know it's fake. Like there's nothing there that's real. And you enjoy the show because it might be a good show, but yet there's something that's just missing about it because it's not the same as a real working model of something. Like, imagine if you went to a working farm that was modeled off of the 1700s, and they're in there and they're milking cows and they're making cheese and they're doing all the things that you would have done on an old-timey farm before technology. And you get to go see these people dressed in traditional garb and they just live in there, right? Or maybe you go to an Amish community. That's kind of how they are. It's like you go back in time and you see these people living in a way that's reminiscent of how they used to live. Well, that's a simulation. Like that's a real working model. It's not fake. Now, imagine you go to something like the Fifth Avenue Theater and you have people that are playing the part of farmers. And they have tools and they're pretending to chop wood and they're pretending to harvest wheat, and there's music and there's dance and there's all these different things that they're going through the motions to display, and they're doing a good job. But it's fake. The fire is fake. The work is all just an act. You can tell. And that's how it is with theme park MMOs. And I want to like them. And I do like them. I like the idea of them. I like the idea when you make your character and you know you're going to be going off on this great adventure. But then there's this letdown. As soon as you go out into that virtual world and you do a few quests and you realize that you're kind of in a funnel, you're on rails, you can't just choose to do whatever you want because despite the fact that it's supposed to be a world without limits, it feels like everywhere you go, there's limits. There's barriers you can't pass. There's edges of the map you can't cross. There's that sense of an endless number of quests you need to get done, and also a suspicion that if you weren't doing quests, there wouldn't be anything to do. There's that sense of the joy of crafting items, and then there's also the sense that none of it really matters because it's not really a simulated economy. It's not really necessary. It's just a choice that you can role play to have fun with, but it's totally optional. The game doesn't need you to craft anything. You can not craft and you'll be fine. You can just stay on rails, do the quests, and make your way through the game the way the devs wanted you to. And it all just feels like that stage play that you can't get out of. And as with all stage plays, they're good when you sit down and you watch them for a little while, kind of like watching a movie or a good television show. But where they grow stale is after many hours when you realize that it is still fake. It's still on rails. You want that sense of something real. You want that sense of something that you can truly participate in a meaningful way and affect the outcome of. And Albion Online is that way. Now, is it the same all the time? Yeah, it is. It's the same mobs. It's the same activities of grinding and fighting and doing tedious, repetitive things. That's true. And I guess if you don't like that at all, you probably shouldn't play an MMO. What I like about Albion is that it's not really invasive, so you can do other things while you're grinding. It's really not something that takes a lot of mental power to get your head around what's going on. So, as a passive activity, just something to do in the background that gives you a sense of participating in a little model world, it does that. And it does that in a way that's not intrusive, and it doesn't force you to do anything. It doesn't give you a sense that you need to do more so that you can achieve more. It just is what it is. And that's really nice because the worst thing is feeling like you're obligated to do something after it stops being fun. Albion Online has no such mechanics. If you aren't having fun, just don't play right now. And in my case, I always wind up coming back. Never because I feel like I need to. There's nothing I need to get done in the game. It's just if I haven't logged in for a little while, I think, man, I'd like to sit down and play Albion. It's just a natural thing. And it's so seamless. It's so easy to access. I mean, I've played Albion Online in a hotel room before. Hit the road, going somewhere, and don't bring a computer, just happen to have the cell phone, and I can still play Albion Online to get, 15 minutes of playtime to get my daily premium bonus or whatever it is. Gather a few logs and chill out for a few minutes, and I get my gaming in. Didn't even have to bring a computer to do it. It's just cool. But at the core of it, though, it goes back to the fact that Albion Online is truly a simulation. It's a simulation. It's a model of a realistic economy. And that's what makes it cool. It's kind of, it's like those model trains that actually go. You turn them on and they run down the tracks, and it's like looking at a real train. But it's a toy. And it's also not really a toy because it's realistic in a way that you would not expect a toy to be. And Albion Online has this amazing economy where everything you're doing feels like it's meaningful. Like, I could play another game, like a Stardew Valley sort of game, or I've been playing Coral Island a little bit to give it a try. And those are fun games. But you run into this feeling of, why do I want to go gather more resources, craft more stuff, when at the end of the game, at the end of the day, nobody cares, because it's not for anybody else. It's just my own isolated experience. But in Albion Online, I just know, like, this rock that I'm gathering is going to be turned into some meaningful resource for another player, a weapon or a house on an island or something. Like, this is meaningful because it means something to other players. And that's really cool, to be able to feel like you're part of a broader community, whether you're playing with other people or not. And it's really cool to be able to have something of a light MMO experience without needing to commit a lot of time to it, to the point where it starts to feel like you're a slave to the game instead of just playing it because you want to have fun. So I would recommend the game, and I tend to come back to this a lot because I think it's really it's something that you can't talk about enough in the MMO genre. The fact that sandbox games are so rare, and really I don't know of any other than Albion Online and EVE Online. And there's some other games that integrate a little bit of sandbox elements. But as far as having a realistic economy that really is player driven and isn't some sort of a weird hybrid where players can make stuff, but the game also is continually creating stuff out of thin air, or where you're creating the simulation of needing to put a lot of effort into crafting something just because the game wants you to put a lot of time into it. Like, it's not really tied to any physical activity. It winds up being something more like you go into a dungeon and you fight the same dungeon 30 times because you're looking for a specific rare drop. Well, that's not cool. That's not the same as knowing, okay, I need 500 rough leather so that I can craft this particular batch of stuff I want to make. So I'm going to go hunt a certain number of wolves or something. You know, in Albion Online, it just makes sense. Like, you have to put in the effort if you want to get the result. But you can understand the logic behind it, and you can see that you're playing a role in a active simulation. And that's what makes it fun. That's what makes it something where you can put it away, you can come back to it, and it always feels genuine and it feels real. And whatever money you wind up acquiring in-game currency, that money feels meaningful. It feels special. And like, if I quit playing this game, I could take all the money that I've made in the game and I could give that to other players, and they would actually value it. So, that's just really cool. It's really cool, and I don't think there's really any other MMOs that do it that well. And when I talk about Eve, I think it's worth mentioning Eve is just too complex. And it's too devoid of relatable graphics. Because when you're just out in the blackness of space flying around, that gets old after a while. I mean, it's easy to make a simulation of space because all you need is blackness. You don't have to really put a lot of effort into it, in a way. But in Albion Online, you have this sense of being attached to the ground. You have a sense of distance and space. You have a sense that the world you're part of does have limits. It is pretty large, but it does have limits. And so I think EVE Online, it's a really cool game. But again, it goes back to being a game that requires you, if you're going to have a good experience, to look at it more like a job than just a relaxing pastime. And once you start to do that, the fun goes away. And I think Albion Online does strike a good balance there. Yeah, it does have a toxic community if you choose to see it that way. But then again, there's a lot of games that say that they have good communities, and I don't know that they're really all that noble. I think it's more optics. In any game you play, you're going to have nice people, and then you're going to have other people who aren't fun to play with. And really, whatever you put in, that's probably what you're going to get out. And if you look for positive people to play with, you probably can find them. You can certainly find them in Albion Online. Just a matter of accentuating the positive there. But yet another plug for Albion Online. If you have not tried it, I would recommend it, especially for people who may want a very casual experience and want a little bit of a taste of an MMO without the time sink of a MMO or the slave to grinding of an MMO. Thank you very much for watching. Till next time. Goodbye.